5 divers are exploring an underwater cave more than 100 meters deep. They had only been swimming for a short while when one of them got stuck in a rock crevice and quickly lost consciousness. The teammate behind, who witnessed everything, struggled violently before also perishing. The diver trapped in the middle panicked and thrashed wildly, trying to force his way past his teammate's body. Faced with this suffocating scene, the rearmost diver had no choice but to abandon his companions and swim back alone, desperate and isolated through hundreds of meters of twisting tunnels until he finally reached the exit. But just when he thought he was about to escape, he discovered that the water surface above had completely frozen over. And this is the tragic Plura Cave incident we are going to talk about in this episode. Plura Cave is located in a remote valley in northern Norway. Vast amounts of limestone in the mountains, eroded by rivers over hundreds of years, created the deepest and most complex underwater cave system in northern Europe. The deepest point in Plura's underwater section exceeds 132 meters. The labyrinth-like tunnel network stretches at least 3 kilometers and connects to another dry cave inside the mountain. Some passages are extremely narrow, the water temperature is very low, and combined with complex gas management and lengthy decompression procedures, it places extremely high demands on divers' psychological resilience and technical skills. On February 5, 2014, 5 Finnish divers drove to Plura Cave. They were Kai Kenkinen, Patrick Grintfrist, Jari Huotarinen, Vesa Rantanen, and Jari Uusimäki. All were experienced cave divers and held full CCR cave diving certifications. Just the previous year, Kai and Patrick had been the first to discover and complete the connection between the 2 entrances, entering through the dry cave and exiting via Plura. That traverse gave them great confidence, leading to this second crossing 1 year later. The difference this time, they planned to enter through Plura and traverse in the reverse direction. The 5-man team was split into 2 groups, descending 2 hours apart to minimize stirring up silt and keep visibility as clear as possible. The leaders of each group were Kai and Patrick, using underwater scooters. If everything went smoothly, the entire dive would take about 5 hours. However, the river surface was already frozen. They first had to break through a half-meter thick layer of ice to enter Plura. While Patrick and Jari, first team, cleared the ice, the second team's 3 members carried equipment up to the dry cave entrance. By the time they returned, a triangular opening had been made in the ice. As planned, Patrick and Jari entered the water first. The water temperature was near freezing, and they were soon enveloped in darkness, but with dive lights, visibility remained reasonable. They used scooters to save energy and carried closed-circuit rebreathers, which allow smaller cylinders and longer bottom times, but also carry greater risk, since any breathing irregularity can lead to CO2 buildup. Each diver carried 3 bailout cylinders as backup. After a short descent and ascent, the 2 reached a large air chamber about 250 meters long, a huge partially flooded space where one could swim or wade through. After passing this chamber, the tunnel dropped steeply, becoming narrower with very high water pressure and near 0-degree temperatures. Any tear in a dry suit would almost certainly be fatal, but for the well-prepared pair, everything seemed under control. They reached the deepest underwater point at 132 meters, turned off their scooters, and briefly admired the surroundings. Markings from Kai and Patrick's previous year's dive were still on the guideline. Jari added his own with a waterproof marker. 1 hour had passed since entering the water. They then began a 120-minute decompression ascent, but at around 12 meters depth, disaster struck. Patrick noticed his teammate's light suddenly vanish. Swimming back, he found Jari's light swinging wildly up and down. He was jammed in a tight restriction. Jari signaled Patrick to remove 1 bailout tank, but even after that, he remained stuck. Patrick checked and realized Jari's scooter was entangled in the guideline. Normally, simply ditching the scooter would free him, but Jari was already in extreme panic. When they finally discarded the scooter and tried to continue, Jari's breathing became heavier and more erratic. Hyperventilation prevented proper CO2 elimination, risking blackout. Perhaps sensing the danger, Jari frantically signaled for Patrick to hand him a bailout mouthpiece. After a few desperate breaths, he seemed to stabilize and switched back to the rebreather. But whether due to equipment failure or mental confusion, he repeated this switch 3 times. Patrick helplessly watched his friend go from panic to losing the mouthpiece, losing consciousness, and finally drowning after inhaling water. Now Patrick was also in grave danger. The time spent helping Jari at depth had ballooned his decompression obligation from 2 hours to 7, and it kept increasing. Realizing he would share Jari's fate if he stayed, Patrick forced himself to calm down, regulate his breathing, and begin the long, slow ascent. Meanwhile, 2 hours after the first team entered, the second group dove as planned. Visa led, followed by Jari Huatarainen, with Kai deliberately in last position to watch over the others. The beginning went smoothly. They reached the air chamber in about 20 minutes, but Kai knew this dive would be tougher. They carried far more bailout tanks because Visa, prioritizing safety, insisted on bringing 5 large ones despite Kai's warnings that extra gear becomes dead weight. Kai even took 1 extra to lighten Visa's load. As expected, near 125 meters the passage narrowed dramatically. Vice City tried to squeeze through an opening less than a meter wide and became trapped. In panic, his fin got caught in the guideline. After struggling, the pressure helped free his foot and he partially escaped. But precious time was lost. At that depth, every 5 minutes of delay adds roughly an hour to decompression. The freezing water and mounting psychological pressure began to fray Vice's nerves. The 3 continued to the deepest point and saw the first team's markings on the line. But seconds later, Vesa, in front, witnessed a horrifying sight. Jari Huatarinen's body, wedged in the restriction, completely blocking the path. While trying to shed gear to squeeze past, he signaled trouble to those behind. Kai at the rear had no idea. When he caught up, he saw Jari's body swaying strangely, and Vesa frantically switching regulators. Kai tried to calm him without success. Moments later, Vesa stopped moving. Shocked, but knowing he could not stay, Kai pressed forward and saw another teammate's body and Vicet desperately struggling to pass. Kai signaled Vicet to turn back, but Vicet refused. The return path was longer, and he was in full panic, surrounded by 2 dead teammates, with a third about to die in front of him, and the way forward totally blocked. Kai made the agonizing decision to turn around alone and begin the long solitary swim back. He doubted he would make it out. His gas supply was insufficient for full decompression. He decided to skip most stops, gambling everything. To conserve gas, upon reaching the air chamber, he surfaced and breathed the stored air inside. Enough for days, accepting that no rescue would come for the others, and they would be presumed dead. Without hesitation, he re-entered the water. But his scooter failed, turning what should have been under 20 minutes to the entrance into nearly 50. While Klewer, reaching the ice ceiling, he could not find the exit. The morning hole had refrozen. Relying on memory, he used his last strength to smash through nearly 1 centimeters of new ice and emerged around 1:30 a.m. Exhausted, Kai dragged his gear to the van, started the engine, and rested briefly. Intuition told him his companions were likely all dead. While Kai risked his life to return, Vesa, having removed much of his gear, finally squeezed through the gap between the bodies. During decompression, he was repeatedly hit by the reality of losing 2 teammates and puzzled why Patrick was nowhere to be seen. In fact, Patrick had been hovering in the icy water for hours. Just as both men reached their physical and mental limits, a miracle occurred. At about 6 meters from the surface, Patrick saw a light coming from below, around 12 meters down. He dove immediately. The 2 reunited underwater. Seeing each other alive gave them enormous mental strength, but they ascended far too quickly, especially Vesa, who already felt joint pressure. At 9 p.m., Patrick surfaced first after 8.5 hours underwater. Soon after, Vesa emerged. Because they surfaced nearly 90 minutes ahead of safe limits, Vesa suffered severe right knee pain, decompression sickness. Unable to exert themselves immediately after surfacing, they waited another hour in the dry cave before climbing the 90-meter ascent to exit. They then immediately alerted Norwegian authorities. Since Kai was still missing, the 2 returned to the site and found the van lights on. Kai was inside. The 3 survivors' joy was quickly overshadowed by the deaths of their 2 friends. After the accident, Norwegian police launched an investigation. The 3 survivors, Patrick, Kai, and Vesa, were interviewed. Vesa remained hospitalized with severe decompression illness. Recovering the bodies proved extremely difficult. An experienced British cave diving team attempted entry from the dry cave, but deemed moving the bodies too risky and aborted. Authorities ultimately decided to leave both bodies in the cave permanently and sealed the entire Pluba system. To the outside world, the case seemed closed, but for the 3 survivors, it marked the beginning of another torment. Constant feelings of powerlessness and guilt. Kai developed severe anxiety and never dove again. Vesa continues to suffer ongoing decompression-related after effects. When Patrick later asked if they would personally bring their friends home, all 3 agreed without hesitation. Thus began a secret body recovery operation. They assembled a 17-person team of top cave diving experts. Equipment alone weighed tons. 50 bailout cylinders were pre-positioned at depths of 6 menald, 21, 56 menald, 75 menald, 90 menald, and 10 menald. The team split into two groups. One entered via pleura to remove the bodies. The other entered via the dry cave to escort them out, ensuring the first group could safely decompress. A decompression chamber was pre-placed on the pleura side as backup. On March 24 at 1 a.m., the operation commenced. The recovery team took about 50 minutes from the pleura entrance to the accident site. The second group then used scooters to relay the bodies to the dry cave exit. After removing all cylinders and gear, the mission was declared successful. A brief memorial was held for the deceased. Authorities were notified, and underwater footage and equipment were handed over to police. Although the recovery was an unauthorized operation, no charges were filed against the divers. The story was later made into a documentary.
Don't forget, subscribe for more cave stories like this.